Dude, I'm so excited for today. First of all, I'm really sorry for, how short yesterday's video was and everything. And on top of that, right off the start, I ended up getting yellowed. I don't really know what term to use for. Basically, if you haven't seen that video, go and check it out. It's literally 5 minutes of your time, and you could probably get a nice chuckle out of that one. Not that you don't laugh at me regularly anyway. Not with me. At me. Over the past few months, I had a challenge, or more so a class that I considered a challenge in Warzone specifically, but it could also just be a challenge in general because it's not good. It's not fun. I created arguably the worst AK-47 class setup, and I'm not talking about those class setups where, you put the short barrel on it, a sniper rifle scope on a pistol or something. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm saying I am quite literally not just slapping anything on it, I am specifically trying to make my recoil on the worst recoil weapons in the game even worse. So I had this AK-47 class here. Let's go to the private match. I had this AK-47 class right here that is the worst recoil that I have experienced. Now, I started thinking in my head, maybe this AK is a little bit too difficult, or maybe it's not even the hardest one I can do. So thinking about it, I figured that the 3 worst recoil weapons in the game, I would say like the AK and the Odin and maybe R or maybe even an LMG or something, but definitely the Odin and the AK. I mean, these gotta be the highest recoil weapons in the game. I mean, I'm taking a look at it. I mean, AMAX has some kick to it, but not nearly as much as the AK. Growl's out of the question. RAM has some recoil, but not like uncontrollable recoil. M13, you don't need a working brain. Well, I mean, basically, you don't really need a working brain for most of these when you set them up, but when you're doing what I'm doing, the AK has the shortest barrel on here, so we can lose recoil control and bullet velocity to make it even worse. And we go no stock to get our movement speed, but we're basically an AK-74U with no attachment, which is not good recoil at all. And then we got the Odin, and I can literally only use one item on this entire thing that can actually make its recoil even worse, and that's the short 420mm barrel. It's the only thing that reduces its recoil control on the entire thing, unless I'm missing something. So I'm gonna compare these side by side. I got this Scar as well. We got the short barrel on there, just like the usual. And then again, we're using the either no stock or collapsible equivalent to lose even more recoil control. So let's see which one is worse. I mean, honestly, even if the AK does end up being the worst recoil still out of this entire thing, I also swapped back from dynamic aim response curve back to standard. I felt like maybe that was a bit more Cold War, so I just went with this. I was doing linear for a little bit, but it felt a little bit too funny. So anyway, let's see this recoil pattern, okay? Now we got the Odin secondary. We're gonna shoot right here at this. Then we swap over to the Scar. I mean, as you can see, the AK is still vertically anyway the fucking worst. The Odin, I mean, comes in here, but the Scar, that thing pulls hard to the right. Straight up, and then all the way it just turns off real hard to the right if you keep it there. So the AK is still absolutely the worst in the game, but these are pretty terrible, I'm not gonna lie. The way that they even feel, I mean, that Odin actually felt like near impossible to deal with. Shit, I mean, most of the time people are building their classes and stuff like that to try to make them obviously as good and as easy as possible to use. Specifically for Warzone most of the time. And with the meta of Warzone being like, super long range, super slow, but super easy to use weapons with like no recoil and trying to like, create the most damage laser beam kind of thing. People get used to that amount of like no recoil or whatever. So whenever you go over to multiplayer with the faster acting weapons, it's a little jarring. So I mean, the Scar recoil's pretty bad. It definitely pulls to the right super hard. Probably more than anything else I've felt, unless, I haven't messed around with like the M4 or something like that. I'm sure an M4 with like no recoil attachments is like awful. So no stock, lightest barrel. To put the SOCOM rounds on the thing. Oh my god. Is there anything else that's going to make this worse? I don't think so. I mean, this has got to be the world's worst M4. Good luck with this one. Hey, somebody go in the Warzone and win with this shit. First of all, using SOCOM rounds. Second of all, good luck hitting anything at distance with this shit. I didn't even test the M4 to see what the recoil is on this thing, but everybody's already seen how that AK goes. I'll do the Odin. First, we're gonna put Obsidian on there for both of them, because I wasted way too much time not to use it and mention it in every single situation that I can. I'll do Shoot House, because I think Shoot House will be a bit more fair when I try to actually test this thing out at different ranges and stuff. Dude, this M4, I mean, he's out here looking up all like their highest tier M4 builds and everything. I'm aware that the M4 is still an incredibly popular popular weapon. It just is one of the most searched weapons or whatever, most used weapons and all that shit too. I don't know how accurate these sites are anymore with like the popularity of certain weapons and things like that, considering a lot of them don't get updated with like the newest weapons and other things like that. So, and seeing the Warzone fatigue sit in for some people, I've been just seeing people just play fucking, what is it, Among Us? No, I can't play Among Us. Like, here's the thing about Among Us. Even if you're good at Among Us, doesn't that just make you a really good, disgusting fucking liar? That's not okay, or something to brag about. Oh my god, what is this recoil? The good thing is it's only 10 bullets. I mean, since it's only 10 bullets, it's actually not that bad to try to control. I mean, let's see the Odin now. The visual recoil is absolutely disgusting. I can't even... There's no way. I mean, the recoil's not that bad. It's the first couple shots that's terrible. I don't think the recoil itself is what's crazy. It's more so like the visual recoil. This thing has more visual recoil than a 5-year-old being asked to eat their vegetables. Oh my god. It's even hard to actually hold the recoil down even while mounted. Oh my. Oh yeah, I have all of my effects turned off, so you'll notice that I've been like hard capped at around 240. I mean, its time to kill is very fast. It's just at distance, it ain't gonna work. The AK definitely still has worse recoil though. The Odin shoots slow enough to kind of deal with it. It's kind of, it bounces to the left and right a lot, but the AK, it goes up, it goes left, it goes right, it jumps randomly. There's not consistent spaces between the bullets. I gotta reload. Oh my god, hey, if you shoot somebody in the head though, they die. Oops. That recoil's gross. I wonder if you can get a one-shot headshot with these bullets. Can't hit that fuck. Mounted and I'm getting recoil. That's mind-blowing to me. It's not that bad. Really, it's not that bad. That AK, definitely harder to use. I could try that SCAR, but I really don't think it's gonna be that hard to use. I think that AK is just impossible. So today is probably the biggest UFC card of the year, or at least one of them. Israel Adesanya versus Paulo Costa. This fight is super hyped up. It's really fun and shit like that, especially for like casual fans and stuff too. These are always like the really fun ones because everybody gets involved. The stylistic differences and just go like, whoa, that's really interesting. Got Israel Adesanya, who is basically like a ridiculously high IQ, technical striking ability and capabilities, and a very, very decorated kickboxing record. Israel Adesanya is the real deal. Okay, the last fight that he had against Yoel Romero, everybody was like, oh my god, Yoel Romero is such a monster. This guy's scary. This guy's a beast, and it's not taking anything away because he absolutely is. But Yoel Romero had a game plan where basically I cannot walk forward into Adesanya. I can't. I'm shorter than him. He's much longer than me. Much more technical than me. Everything under the sun is telling me not to just walk straight into his range like that. And of course, you know, people that don't really understand fighting are like, dude, look how big and how strong he is. Why doesn't he just walk forward and hit Adesanya? And why is Adesanya so scared of him? Why isn't he just like standing there in front of him and swinging for the fences with him or some shit? Like, it's crazy because people will call Adesanya boring and shit like that when his striking style is arguably one of the most risky fighting styles you can do. This whole thing where you're like this technical counter striker slash person that moves around with their head movement or hands down, Anderson Silva type, that to me is more dangerous and more impressive than that whole swang and bang, just throwing hooks left and right at each other. Obviously, to be a brawler, obviously to be a regular old fighter, obviously you can be tough in any way, shape, or form. Don't get me wrong, they can all be cool in their own way. But it is 100% more dangerous to sit there in front of somebody, especially someone you absolutely know is capable of separating you from their senses as a professional, with your hands down. That to me is risky. That is entertaining. People see it as like disrespectful and all this other stuff. It's all done for a particular reason, to try to lead people in all sorts of different sports, all sorts of different things, just mental warfare. You can respect somebody and then act like you don't respect them just to have you goad them in. That's what Anderson Silva did a ton. The dude would literally keep his hands down and stand flat against the cage for you to press it. If you're not skilled enough, this is literally asking to just get your ass whooped. But when you are skilled enough, you can use it to your advantage. So Yoel Romero knew that whole thing and he was just like, no, I'm not gonna press into that. And people were just disappointed. They just don't really understand, like, that anyone that is a trained professional isn't just going to stand there and swing punches with somebody they know they're not going to be able to technically outstrike. At the end of it all, you still, as a fighter, as a human being, at the end of the night, any doubt that creeps into your mind, you're gonna try to think of any strategy that you can to win. That's what Romero did, and people don't respect that, but they're not the ones fighting, so now people are all hyped about Costa because Paulo Costa is like Yoel Romero, but more just, he doesn't care. He's going to walk forward. There's no question about it. Whereas Romero surprised everybody by just literally standing there asking Adesanya to come to him. All I'm gonna say is, for me, and it's no disrespect to Paulo, it's not like he can't win. He absolutely has a puncher's chance to be able to just overwhelm him and just, you know, land a couple large strikes in volume and just never let him recover. But if you ever go and watch Paulo Costa versus Uriah Hall, if you watch that fight before this fight, I have a feeling we're gonna see a similar fight. That jab, that distance, that footwork and everything that Uriah was used, it's gonna be even worse when he faces somebody like Adesanya, who's taller, longer. Some people want Costa to just straight up walk up and then just straight up punch through Adesanya's guards slash movement and stuff like that and just bulldoze through and crush him. A lot of people want to see that. Honestly, this M4 with the SOCOM rounds and no recoil control, not that bad. Not multiplayer anyway. To see now in Warzone, it's a whole different story. You gotta stay on target a little bit longer because of the armor or whatever, but 10 rounds in Warzone, not a good idea either. And that's virtually the worst recoil you can really get. I think the AK is still definitely the hardest one to use with no recoil help. I got my money on Adesanya. I'm not a betting man whatsoever. I'm not saying it's gonna be easy. I'm just saying this fight is tailor-made for him. And then the co-main event, Dominic Reyes versus Jan. Considering Dominic Reyes nearly, or in some people's eyes, did beat John Jones, I'm gonna have to go with Dominic Reyes. He's just too much of an athlete. MMA memes aside, no, Dominic Reyes, he's gonna be too big, too long, footwork is going to be too good. Obviously, he doesn't have the same style as Adesanya, but I feel like he's just going to use his length, his height, his athleticism and stuff like that, and he's just going to outwork him. I mean, he could just get dropped and just straight up right hook Polish power from Jan. Who knows? I have no idea, but we'll see.